Okay, hi everyone. I'm Jason. I'm really glad to be here. So I teach at DePaul University in Chicago. I teach in the Department of Writing, Rhetoric, and Discourse, and my background is in applied linguistics and TESOL. So I want to mention that here. I come back to it. But I want to jump right in. Watch the time, so I stick in my 15 minutes or trying to. First, I just want to give a quick overview of what do we mean when we talk about slow research, bring in some ideas about that. And then kind of my argument for why that's useful for thinking about researchers and national students, especially around the issues framing the conference. Three, give an example of my research. It's definitely been slow. And then look at the practical challenges of doing slow research. Kind of engage with those and not try to dismiss them because they are real. Okay, so what is slow research? So I think in the broadest sense, we can think about it as one of the responses to this kind of culture of speed, we could say, that's dominating more and more of our lives. So we can think of it in some kind of relation to this concept of slow food. I don't know if that has international currency, but so you can imagine slow food is whatever fast food is not. So the opposite of that. So that would be, so slow research is different, but one of sort of many reactions to a sense that things are moving really quickly. That second point there kind of brings it more to the university. So it's a response to the sense of the neoliberal university, which is very metric oriented, which wants us to produce things and produce things quickly and have evidence of producing things quickly. So in one version here from one of our colleagues, this is part of feminist ethics of care, a response to the demands of the university. The third point there, so slow research also acknowledges that some research takes a long time. It does not happen quickly. It does not always produce easily condensed findings, which is sometimes what it feels like articles are supposed to do, or what journals want articles. And not all research does that because it's slow. And then the last point I think kind of relates. When we go slowly, we start to see a lot more things. And some of those things are small and nuanced in their details. And again, I think we're kind of encouraged to often focus on finding the big things like the grand, seemingly universal patterns. The slow research kind of encourages you to attend to small things, which also have value. So kind of recognize and acknowledging that. Okay, so these next couple of slides, I want to pull out a couple points that I think make this slow research applicable to working with international students. So the first point here, slow research works to see phenomena is situated. So I have a quote here from Pierre Bourdieu, who I don't think ever talked about slow research as such, but he definitely did slow research through his ethnographic work. And I'm actually not going to read that because it's very Bourdieusian. But to paraphrase, what I take from this is the idea that if you want to understand something, use the word a pre-constructed object, probably not the words I would use, but if you want to understand something, the way you understand it, or an important part of understanding it, is not to look only at that something, but to try to understand all the things around it. So by understanding the field or social space for Bourdieu, is how you actually start to understand whatever that something is and how it becomes what it is. So I would simplify that even more to say being open to context or contexts. So I think that's definitely, for me, in the background, for example, of some of the chapters in the book, is sort of thinking about how do we understand all the things that seem to be happening around international education, international students as necessary for understanding, making any claims, and trying to understand experiences or situations of international students. So context is one thing the slowness allows us to do. Second point here, at the top there, it's one thing to say is that slow can mean longitudinal research that's supposed to take a long time. It's planned to take a long time. But slowness is also about a process and an approach. So I'm going to read this quote. I really like it. So slow research is about becoming aware of and open to new possibilities, for collecting data, into new ways of thinking about, analyzing, and writing up our findings. So circling back to work we consider done and allowing ourselves the possibility of thinking about it in a different way. So I think that's something we're not usually encouraged to do, is sort of rethink things and go back to things that we think are done. And another word that these authors, Nelson and Hertz, bring up as kind of a central heuristic for their way of talking about slow research is the idea of disruption. So when we're doing research, disruptions happen. And those can be disruptions that are internal to the research, like something comes up in the research experience or working with participants that was unexpected, or that was really throws off what we thought we were doing. Disruptions can also happen in life, of course, that you aren't expecting. And so the question is like, how do you react to those disruptions? So one reaction is to try to make them go away and act like they aren't there. Another is to try to be open to them. and sort of figure out, okay, if something comes up in your research that you didn't expect or don't really know how to deal with, can you be open to that and try to rethink what you're doing and reframe the way your research is going? And that takes time, of course. So disruption. So kind of summarizing those two, again, these are ideas I think are particularly applicable to working with international students. Context, disruption, then I'll add in here time. So obviously time is inherent to the claim of slow research. But I think there's things that time can allow to happen that actually cannot happen unless time is there. And that sometimes is the really challenging part of getting to the minute. So definitely time relates to the example I'll give here, a project of mine. I'll just say to frame this quickly that I mentioned I do a lot of work in applied linguistics, often around writing. So I designed this project 2015 to work with a small number of international students, 9 undergraduate students, over 4 years, of course, of their college careers, to learn about what it meant for them to be writers at the university. So when I started out, these are kind of different titles at different moments to capture some of the evolution and change. When I started out, I was calling the project Global Education International Student Writers. That was like the title I needed to give for the my IRB application to ethics board approval. So like at that moment, I was already thinking about context. Like I was trying to figure out what these students, their situations in a more global sense, even though they were at the university I was at. But I was really thinking about them as writers. I mean, these are student writers. That was kind of the defining term for me. So that's kind of where I was at the beginning. So around year 2, 3, I published an article called Passages in the College Writing, listening to the experiences of international students. So obviously international students trying to listen, but again, focused on writing experiences is really the center of that. I did mention actually this is a qualitative project mainly based on interviews that go over the 4 years. Okay, and then a little bit later, a couple years later, maybe year 4 or 5, I don't know, I published an article called Writing Strategies as Acts of Identity. So writing strategies is a heuristic in applied linguistics. But when this word identity comes in, like to me, that was a moment where I'm starting to really rethink what I'm doing. I'm starting to think more broadly. And I started out thinking about context as context around writing. Now moving sort of further along, and I'm starting to realize that actually maybe those contexts are the thing itself, and the writing is one of the contexts. So somewhere around year 5, I think, I had what I would think would be a disruption where I really had to like rethink things. And I went back to the data and reading this interview data. It's a lot, it's hundreds of pages, but rereading it, trying to figure out what is going on here, what are the issues, and I kind of came to the conclusion this really isn't about writing, and writing's not the interesting part here. And I realized from listening to the students and learning from them that writing wasn't the interesting part to them. And it wasn't really how they saw their lives at all. As college students, it was a piece of it, but it really wasn't what they felt like they were going through. So anyway, I kind of reoriented my thinking, and I decided to try to broaden the project. And now I'm working with this kind of working title for monograph, International Student Mobility in Higher Education, so case studies and agency. So the word agency becomes central, identity is still central. And again, I moved from kind of making students' experiences as they seem to be telling them, and I was learning from them, as more central. And the writing is one piece of that. Of course, I'm still working with, I collect a lot of written text from them. The writing is just one piece of that. So that was kind of a way slowness affected my project for sure. So I would just say quickly, I'm not presenting this as like a model of how one should do things. I mean, I think there's been things about it that I think have positive outcomes, but there's a lot of challenges too, sort of problematic aspects of it. But it's kind of how that slowness has affected that project for me. Some challenges that I was thinking about for sure. So one thing I kind of mentioned earlier, academic institutions, they want to see quick results, publications, and those are necessary for advancement within the institution. And that is not supportive of slowness at all. And that's a reality that we're all sort of dealing with in different ways, I'm sure, but it's there. Second, grant applications, my experience, they always require timelines. And they don't want to see a timeline that says like 8+ years or something like that. It might be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. You've got to define what you're going to do in that period. And also you're supposed to define what you imagine results will be and kind of show those. So again, that's that can work against a slowness attitude. If like you're in graduate school, you're working on a thesis or dissertation, like those need to get finished. I would not encourage you stretch those out forever. Get them done. And again, but that's also against kind of slowness mentality. And then the last one, maybe related to these, career plans, life events. Don't always encourage slowness. They make us need to complete things. So career plans, I'm partly thinking, if you're a grad student and you're working on getting your dissertation done, you go to the job market, it can definitely be to your advantage if you have one or more publications, or at least accepted publications. That requires speed. You can't wait around to do that. You got to get them done. And that's, that's for real. Cannot deny that. Life events, things happen in life. And obviously, and sometimes they make us need to get through a project because other things in life are demanding our attention. So these are all challenges of doing slow research. And I don't have solutions, but I would put this out there as maybe a thought. So maybe a way to sort of reconcile these challenges with desire for slow research, if you're someone who thinks that could provide you with opportunities that are positive, maybe trying to imagine projects as having multiple timescales. And I kind of give my example. I didn't plan it that way, but I think that's how, looking back, it's kind of worked out. Where at certain points of data collection, I had things I was able to work with and write an article from that at different moments. But I also have like a longer time scale, which allows me to reflect and think on the big project, and maybe something different comes out of that. So I didn't plan that, but maybe there would be ways to plan that, from the beginning, sort of figure out what can I do at different moments in this project that I think will last multiple years. It's going to take time, but if you have to produce things, that's important, and you may be able to do that along the way with certain amounts of data. Okay, I think that's all I was going to say. I think I'm right after my time, which means I talk quickly, I think. Okay, next time.
Great. Thank you so much.